Welcome to Never Again is Now, a podcast about anti Semitism. Today's episode is a very positive one. It is about Jews and Arabs in Israel who overcame the hate for each other and developed positive relationships. I'm Evelyn Marcus, and in addition to being a psychologist, I am featured in the documentary about anti Semitism Never Again is Now. I am a Dutch Jew and a daughter of Holocaust survivors. In 2006, I immigrated to the United States because of the rising anti Semitism in Europe.
I am Phyllis Zimbler-Miller, the founder of the free nonfiction Holocaust theater project, ThinEdgeOfTheWedge.com. I grew up in Elgin, Illinois, in the Midwest, not in a Holocaust community, where our parents and grandparents had come at the turn of the 20th century to escape the Tsar and other pogroms. Yet in September 1970, my U.S. Army officer husband and I found ourselves stationed in Munich, Germany, only 25 years after the end of World War II, and this changed our lives forever.
Today's guest is Joanne Nihom. She's a Jewish journalist and author in Israel. Joanne grew up in the Netherlands, like me. She emigrated to Israel in 2005. A few months ago, she published her book in the Netherlands titled Over Grenzen, which means beyond borders. In her book, she describes her own journey of developing friendly relationships with Arab Israelis and Palestinians and her moving interviews with other Israelis and Palestinians who also succeeded in developing positive relationships, sometimes spontaneously, sometimes in project. Joanne, welcome to our show.
Thank you for having me.
Today, I asked the first question, which is, please tell us more about your book, including the use of the terms that Evelyn just used, Israelis and Palestinians.
Yes. I moved to Israel in 2005, and I ended up in the northern part of Israel, near the border of Lebanon, in a Jewish village, which is surrounded, because the north is very mixed in Israel, surrounded by Arab and Druze villages. And I write already all my life. In 2005, when I arrived here, a few months later, the Lebanon War started. And for the first time in my life, I was in the middle of a war and started writing about it for friends and family. One of the stories ended up in a Dutch newspaper, and that's how I became a journalist. And because of my work, and because of the way we live here, I do my shopping, I have friends, of course it developed during the years, in the Arab villages. I started to write about it for Dutch papers or magazines, and I discovered that all of them were not interested in them because there were good stories about Israel. And I got very frustrated about it. And that's why I decided, because I think it's very important that people read about it, know about it, understand about what's going on in Israel, that it should be a book. It took me 10 years to find a publishing house. And now it's published in Dutch. It's being translated in American English now, and we hope to find a publishing house in the States and Europe as well. The book is about how Israelis and Palestinians live together. When I started writing the book, I thought I was writing about Arabs and Jews. But already in one of the first interviews, I discovered that the person I was interviewing, who lives in Israel, is working here, considers himself a Palestinian. And when we talked about it, he told me, if you will call me an Israeli, I will not be in the book, because that's not how I see myself. Now, that's when I decided to talk about Israelis and Palestinians. Now, it's getting more complicated, because there are Palestinian Jews and Arabs, because the people who were born before 1948, before Israel was founded, are Palestinians, and there were a lot of Jews living here already, as well as Arabs. Last week, I read an interview with a Jewish guy from Holland who married in Israel with a Jewish girl and has a Palestinian father-in-law. But after 1967, Arafat decided to have his own party group, and he called them and himself also Palestinians. So that's where it's getting complicated. And to show my readers how complicated it is, there's a whole chapter about it in the book. And what I did, when I started the book, I asked the professor in Holland to describe for me all the complicated terms: Palestinians, Arabs, territories, Palestine, Israel. And he gave me a wonderful explanation, and all correct. But when I read it, I thought, this is not right. This is the opinion of one person. So then I decided to ask randomly 10 people, Arabs, Palestinians, Jews, Orthodox, liberal, men, women, to write for me, to describe for me how they use all these terms. And if you read that chapter, which is in the beginning of the book, it's very clear. There's not one answer for.
It's very clear that there's no clear answer.
No.
I want to just say one thing. You used the word Druze. Many of our audience may not, and it sounds like audio is Jews. So could you explain a little bit about who the Jews are and where they fit into that complicated story?
We in Israel, you have all kinds of Arab people, like the Bedouins. They're Arabs. Now the Druze people, about 2,000 years ago, they decided they didn't want to be part of the Arab population anymore, and they became their own group. And because the Arabs didn't like it, it was very secretly. So even today, they're in villages in the northern part of Israel. They're in Lebanon, in Syria. They're very committed to the country where they live. In Israel, they join the army, but they don't talk about their religion. You can hardly find the church. It's like a big room, and they don't want you to call them Arabs. They call themselves Jews.
Druze.
Yeah, it's not Jews, it's with the D. Druze.
Right, Gruze in English.
Yeah.
But they are Muslims, or they're not Muslims?
No, they don't call themselves like that. They call themselves Druze. They have a completely separate religion.
Right.
Sorry, but there is not much known about it. One of the things is that they believe after death that you will be reborn. It's not a church like it's you can't compare it to the Arab people, yeah.
But Joanna, are they so religiously they are not Muslims? But ethnically, are they not Arabs either, or are they Arabs with a different religion than Islam?
No, they don't want they don't want to be called Arabs. Okay. They're Druze.
Okay. Yeah. So if they live in Israel, are they Israelis or Palestinians?
Yeah, Israelis.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's okay. And you used the word church, which is when you meant the religious building, which is why it threw me off a little when you. Okay, Got it.
No, they have like it can be a canteen or, you know, something you don't recognize from the outside because they, the Arabs didn't like it that they split up. So they didn't treat them very nice. So that's why it's all secret.
Okay, thank you so much. Evelyn?
Joanna, how did you come to write this book? And were you also motivated by things in your personal background?
As I told you in the beginning, I moved to Israel in 2005. I come from a Jewish family in Holland, and I'm brought up with Jewish religion, not Orthodox, but all the Jewish traditions, and very Zionistic, which means that Israel always was a big part in our life. And my parents moved to Israel more than 30 years ago. And as Evelyn, I'm also a daughter of Holocaust survivors. And I think because of my background, like you, Evelyn, I feel a duty. I feel it my duty to, I can't change the world, but I can try it with a few drops here and there. And that's why I wrote this book, because I think what's happening in Israel and the world doesn't know about is a lesson. It's here in the Middle East. Israel is one of the most discussed subjects in the world, in the media, almost always in a negative way. And it's actually the opposite. So it's a lesson, I think, for everybody, that you can live together if even if you don't agree with each other.
That leads naturally to the question of, can you give us an example of where you developed a positive relationship with a Palestinian? And when you started out developing that relationship, were you concerned with he or she might have been anti-Semitic, anti-Jew in this case?
Yeah. In all the interviews, and also all the interviews before the book, it's a thought I never had.
What thought, Joanna?
That they wouldn't like me because I'm a Jew.
Oh, okay.
One of the friendships I developed is with a Palestinian woman. She lives in, here we go, with the complicated, in the complicated areas, which the Palestinian people say it belongs to them and the Israeli people say it belongs here. So let's keep it to that. She lives over there. And I did the interview during the Corona time, so I didn't really see her. I could see her or meet her, but we met through Zoom. And she's blind. And she shared with me her story. Her father was killed by the Israeli army. And she became very fanatic against Israel.
Is it what year? I mean, how old is she?
She's in her 40s, and this happened, I think, about 20 years ago, something like that. And her father was very loyal to Israel. He was not a fanatic guy. So when she became fanatic, her mother and her uncle told her, listen, if you're going to be fanatic, do you think this is what your father wants you to be? And then she decided, but still her father was murdered. So she was really, you know, her life, they got on very well. And and she was angry and upset. And then they were in the Shiva time, which is the morning, Jewish morning. Sorry, she was not in the Shiva, of course. She was in the morning time of the Palestinian people. They also have morning time. And there is a group, there are many groups we'll talk about in Israel who are about coexistence, living, coming together of Palestinians and Israelis. And they came to visit them because they heard what happened.
These Israeli groups came to visit.
Yeah,
Okay.
Jewish people. And at first she threw them out of the house, and then she decided, they came again, they phoned, they kept phoning, asking how they were feeling. And at the end, she allowed them to come. And she realized that that they are nice people. And then because her father got murdered, there was not much money in the family anymore. She found a husband, and there was no money to pay the wedding and everything. And this organization paid for it. And then she became pregnant. And I think it's one of the moving moving sentences in the book. She told me, I can bring up my child. He was born after the book, after the Dutch version, but she got a son, and she said, I can bring him up in hate. You know, I can give him a separate life, but if I will do that, the chances are so big that he will end up as a terrorist. So I will send him to mixed schools. There are mixed schools in Israel. And he's going to grow up with Jewish people, because that's the only way to have a better world.
Wow. That's amazing how people from both sides here overcame their pain and hate. So how did her father get murdered?
It was a terrorist attack, but then from the other, you know, they fight
from the Jewish side. Yes. Okay. Yeah. And do you feel that this story has to do with being Arab, being Jew, and overcoming the conflict? Does it have anything to do with anti-Semitism, or does it have to do with the conflict in the region?
That's a very good question. And I'm not sure I can answer it. I will give you another example, which I needs an introduction, but at the end you'll understand why I share this story. There's an interview in the book with Yitzhak. He's Jewish Orthodox. His son was in the army and was trying to get home. A car stopped. There were terrorists in it. They killed him. And his father decided, of course, he was very upset, and that's an understatement, but he decided that continuing his life in hatred, that's not the way. So he went through the internet and started looking for families, Palestinians and Israelis, who lost their child or father or mother or a family member on both sides. So either in a war or a terrorist attack, and he found families, and he started the Parents Circle, which is an organization where Palestinians and Israelis come together. They travel all over the world to tell their story, and they were able to go above hatred and became friends. They cried together, they laughed together, and they're a wonderful example. Now, Yitzhak started this organization, and after the Dutch version was finished, I had to ask him for the book. After I had to ask everybody in the book for permission for the English version. So I phoned Yitzhak, and he said, of course, you get my permission, but I have to tell you something. I'm trying to reach the family of the person who murdered my son, because I want to talk with him. If he murdered my son because he was Jewish, I don't want to talk with him. But if he murdered my son because he's an Israeli, because of the conflict, then I want to talk with him and will want to travel with him around the world and tell our story.
Interesting. And then what happened?
This happened a few months ago, and I asked him a few times. There's no answer yet from the family. Yeah.
Wow. These are big things that people do that we know nothing about, right? That individuals do. Amazing. I'm so happy you shed light on that, on those stories in your book. Janne, Jews all over the world, especially Jewish students in universities, are confronted with hatred against Israel and are held responsible for Israel's so-called atrocities.
Yeah.
Israel genocide, Israel apartheid state, etc. Do you think your book can help to turn this to turn around this demonization of Israel and the can it help Israel supporters? Are there certain ways people after reading your book can in debates and discussions can put forward that Israel is not only the demon?
I hope so, first of all. And I also believe so. I actually, because I'm so convinced that it will help, I decided to invest in the English version, because I don't have a publishing house yet to find a good an official translator. And I think the book shows that a few things, that there is no black and white. Now, it's very easy to say, but there are so many colors here, and I think
Colors of what? Colors
of different opinions,
okay.
of different people, of different religions, of different even the way we live are different, the Arabs and Jews. So if you I think that one of the reasons why there is this hatred against Jews is because people have no idea. A lot is about prejudice, about hearing it from a friend and copying it. And of course, Israel is not a holy country. Things are happening here which are not good, but it's a war going on as well. Now, I think one of the main challenges is, but it's actually all over the world. If there is fighting along the border of Gaza, I live my life here, and I don't make it small, but it's not all over Israel. And when the media puts the attention on it, it's like all of Israel is fighting, is against Arab people, is killing Arabs. I think that's one of the one of the reasons. And the other thing is, and then I have to go to Holland. We both are a member of the Reformed Synagogue in Amsterdam.
Yeah.
When they built their new synagogue, it was near a school, which is where almost only Muslims go. And the members of the synagogue said, we have to build a wall around the synagogue because we don't want hatred. And one of the members said, no, we're going to do the opposite. And they made a program who won a lot of prizes. They made a program, they invited the kids to come to the synagogue. They're allowed to ask everything about Jews. And then they show them about our traditions and they are allowed to walk in the synagogue, talk with whomever they like to talk. And it's a wonderful program. And I think, and they go back to their families and they talk about it. And I think in a way, that's also my book. It's showing what's possible. And I'm not talking about what's not possible, because that's not something we need.
Right. Yes, that's amazing. And you know, I'm personally pretty, how do you say, suspicious and pessimistic about resolving conflicts with people who threaten to kill you. But after reading your book, I'm sure, I'm absolutely not only I have hope, but I'm actually sure that the human spirit will eventually overcome all the conflicts in Israel, because you see how people, what they have, your stories about individuals who overcome severe pain inflicted by the other group, and they overcome it, and they do great things together. There you see the power of the, you know, of the human spirit to be able to develop a positive relationship no matter what the past is. And
can I give another example of what you just said?
Yeah.
I live in a Jewish village, but before 1948, when the state of Israel was founded, this was an Arab village. Now, there are a few stories about what happened in Israel after 1948 during the war. There are there are people who say the Arab leaders told them to leave their cities and promised, you know, one day you'll be able to return. Others will say the Jews threw them out. So I interviewed, it's in a book, a young girl who's an Arab girl. She lives in Tel Aviv, and she's very active in an organization for Palestinians and Israelis on a technical level. And we started the interview, and she asked me, where do you live? And I said, in Beit Emek. And she said, my parents live in Kfar Yassif, which is the Arab village near our village. And she said, my grandparents used to live in your village. And I said, Sada, her name, I said, I'm so sorry, but I don't know what to say. And she said, she's 25 or something, don't worry. We can't live the past, but we have to continue living. And we could have got into a fight about it, and I could have argued and said, no, it went like this. And she could have said it, but this is, you know, this is the level of the people in my book. And this is the level of most of the people in Israel.
Okay, so what you're also...
But it's not easy, because like our parents have a big, like they're carried with them their whole life, the Holocaust. There are many generations on both sides who carry wars with them, you know, who've been fighting here, there, and everywhere. And it's not easy, but it is possible.
Mhm, mhm. So what you're also saying, Johanna, is if you watch the media, you think Israel is all about fighting and separate groups who are hating each other and abusing each other, or one group is abusing the other. But if you actually walk through Israel or travel through Israel, or you live there, you see so many examples of where the groups are very mixed and coexisting well. And that's also an important message of your book.
Hospitals,
Yeah.
public transportation, the shops. You don't. There are few villages or cities where they live together. But you don't have to be in the same house. You know, as long as you respect each other. That's the.
So it's absolutely not an apartheid state if you see it with your own eyes.
No.
Okay.
No. But of course, people will not agree with me because from the media, they know otherwise. Yeah.
Phyllis.
I wanted to bring it a little closer to home here in the United States, just for a couple of minutes, including what we can give our listeners as to how they can answer people on the street. But I think one of the problems that Jews in America have, we are a very, very small percentage of the population in the United States, is that people can spend their entire life in a large city or a small city without ever knowingly know a Jew. Because even though Jews have skin color from very light to very dark, here in the United States, in Ashkenazi populations, as opposed to Sephardi, Mizrahi, where there are darker skinned people. I mean, I grew up as the only Jewish kid in my classes in this small town. They had no idea I was Jewish unless I told them. So in America, one of the things that I think we can do is literally let people know that we're Jewish instead of hiding it, and that we're normal and don't have, I don't even want to say the negative stereotype of thousands of years, and use those lessons from the Israelis and Palestinians to educate people in a friendly way about who Jews are today.
Yeah.
And I think we can learn from you. And then what can we learn about, like, if someone says to me on the street, oh, you are pro-Israel, Israel's an apartheid state. Here in America, what can I say? I can't give them a lecture. They're not listening to a webinar. I'm not going to yell back at them because that doesn't work. No, it's not. What's a sentence or two that I might be able to say, well, have you considered?
Israel's an apartheid state. Israel commits genocide.
Well, first of all, put some of my books in your bag whenever.
That's a good idea. In English, right?
In English. I think it's important if they say something like that to you, but I don't know how exactly that you either say I've been in Israel, or I have family in Israel, or and then you can give examples of, like, all the traffic signs are in Arabic, in English, and in Hebrew. The same in hospitals. When I call to those horrible, when you call to a big shop and you get 1, 2, 3, 4, or your wherever you phone to, it's always in Arabic, English, and even if it's not in English, it's always in Arabic and Hebrew.
Interesting, very interesting.
If you go to the hospitals here, my doctors are Arabic people. The head of the hospital in Nahariya is an Arab guy, and he's also in the book. And he told me, if the world would know how many Arab people are saving Jewish lives instead of, because they all think that Arabs are only killing Jews. It will
Yes.
change the
Very
perspective
powerful.
of the, yeah.
Yes, I think that's really interesting. An example of the hospitals. I'm going to practice that, saying, do
I,
you?
I don't think if you're in a discussion, you should say you're wrong.
Oh, no,
You're-
correct. Absolutely. You shouldn't. Right.
That's not the way. Just say, okay, what do you think Israel is an apartheid? And then you give examples.
I think that's excellent advice. And as we come to the end of this interview, is there anything else that you think that we should cover that's really important? Do you have last words?
Can I read my epilogue of the book?
Yes. Yes, please.
Yes? Okay. I believe in a Middle East peace solution, just not for my parents' generation, survivors of World War II. Their backpack is far too heavy. This also applies to the many generations who have experienced wars here. My hope is focused on the young people. Because of the internet and open borders, they do not think in terms of this piece of land is mine and that belongs to somebody else. There are no boundaries for them. Also, the communication between them is much easier, so that they discover how much they have in common with each other and that the so-called enemy is not really an enemy at all. While the sun slowly disappears as if it's never coming back, the crickets are offering an evening concert and a dog is barking in the distance. As the wind decides to rest for the night, I type these last words. War belongs to the people above us, to politics. You and I have nothing to do with that. What has happened has happened. We cannot go back and change the past. For me, the country is a mishmash of emotions and encounters with known and unknown strangers. Their story and their history are mine. On the palette of beautiful people, it's precisely the shades of color that are part of a fantastic but also complex society. Beyond borders, the manuscript is ready, just like that, on a warm Israeli evening in September. It's hard to believe.
That is so beautiful. Thank you so much for coming on our show. We so appreciate it. Thank our listeners for listening. And I want to say to anyone who has not yet seen Evelyn's documentary, Never Again Is Now, I highly recommend it and encourage it. Viewing it, you can see it on Amazon and YouTube. You can learn more about my free nonfiction Holocaust theater project at thinedgeofthewedge.com. And as we end every podcast, we say, without putting yourself in physical harm, speak up against anti-Semitism and all hate.